The Ranch Rebellion, a Texas tale of property and power. In the heart of Texas, where the horizon stretches wide and the sun burns fierce, I've spent my life tending to the same 500 acres my granddaddy bought in 1943. My name's Harlan Wade, a third-generation rancher with calloused hands and a stubborn streak as deep as the roots of the mesquite trees dotting my land. This isn't just dirt to Mite's legacy, carved from sweat and sacrifice, home to 200 head of cattle and barns that have stood longer than most folks' marriages. Every morning at 5:30, I step onto my porch, coffee in hand, wearing a faded green flannel under a worn denim jacket, and I look out over an empire my family built from nothing. 2 years ago, trouble rolled in with the dust. Developers plowed up the pasture 150 yards from my fence line and built Willow Creek Estates, 47 cookie-cutter houses with manicured lawns and mailboxes all in a row. At first, I didn't mind. New neighbors meant more business for the feed store and better roads from tax dollars. But I should have known that where you get suburbanites, you get someone itching to play king of their own little castle. That someone was Rachel Harper, a 29-year-old transplant from Dallas who swept into Willow Creek like she was running for governor. Rachel had a knack for looking the part: a distressed plaid shirt, jeans with artful rips, and boots that had never seen mud. She carried a clipboard like it was a scepter, preaching about community standards and protecting our kids. Within 6 months, she'd clawed her way to HOA president, promising to clean up the neighborhood. I figured she was just another busybody. I was wrong. Our first run-in happened at Murphy's feed store, where I've been buying supplies for 30 years. I was heaving 50-pound bags of feed into my truck when Rachel sauntered up, clipboard in hand, flashing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Wade," she said, like she was checking a box. "I'm Rachel Harper, Willow Creek HOA president. We need to talk about some concerns our residents have." Her tone made it sound like my cattle were personally offending her ancestors. I set down a bag and gave her my attention, because in Texas, we're polite even when we smell trouble. "Concerns?" I asked, wiping sweat from my brow. She launched into a spiel about the smell from my livestock and the noise from my tractor, claiming it was a health hazard for kids and a drag on property values. I looked at this woman, dressed like she'd raided a thrift store for authenticity, trying to lecture me about a ranch that's been here since before she was born. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice steady, "that smells the tax money that built your kids' school and paved your roads." Her smile flickered, but she scribbled something on her clipboard and walked off. 3 days later, a letter arrived on Willow Creek HOA letterhead, full of legal jargon about environmental impact and community wellness. It claimed my ranch violated non-existent noise and air quality rules and demanded I mitigate the issue or face legal action. It was signed by Rachel and some guy named Greg Turner, the treasurer, though I'd bet he never saw the thing. Then I started noticing things. Cars creeping past my property, folks snapping photos of my barns. Neighbors like Mrs. Clara Hensley, who's lived next to us for 40 years, mentioning strangers with clipboards measuring my land. On social media, Rachel had started a group called Willow Creek Safety First, posting dozens of photos of my ranch with captions like "health hazard next door" and "is this our future?" Comments raged with fake outrage, painting my family's livelihood as a public enemy. I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding to be fixed over coffee. Rachel had declared war, and I was her target. A week later, she upped the ante. I was loading feed when 3 people marched up my driveway: Rachel, Greg, and a nervous woman I didn't know, later identified as their secretary, Ellen Price. They'd parked their SUVs right by my private property sign, a bold move that told me they weren't here to play nice. "Mr. Harlan Wade," Rachel announced, holding out a manila envelope like it was a court summons. "As HOA president, I'm serving you with a formal notice of violation." Greg scribbled notes, and Ellen checked her watch like she wanted to bolt. The envelope contained pages of highlighted text, claiming my ranch broke county zoning laws and posed an immediate threat to the community. I couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity. "Ma'am, this ranch has been here since '43. We've got grandfather clause protection. You're on my land, telling me it's illegal?" Rachel didn't flinch. "You have 30 days to remove all cattle, or we'll take legal action." Ellen mumbled something about what's best for everyone, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. After they left, I walked my property, feeling the weight of their threat. Neighbors who used to wave now avoided me. It hit me that Rachel had been spreading lies, turning folks against me while I was fixing fences. That night, over a beer on my porch, I remembered something my granddaddy said when I was a kid, helping him mend wire. "Son, this land's more than dirt. It's why folks think twice before crossing us." I'd never understood it until now. Granddaddy was a shrewd man who'd outlasted droughts and developers. Maybe there was more to our property than I knew. The next morning, I dug through his old roll-top desk, untouched since he passed 15 years ago. Among feed receipts and tax forms, I found a folder labeled Property Records Original Survey. Inside were deeds, maps, and letters from the 1950s to 1980s. One document stopped me cold, a 1986 surveyor's map showing we owned 550 acres, not 500. In 1985, Granddaddy sold 50 acres to the county for development, but the map proved Willow Creek was built on a different parcel and we still owned. Rachel and her HOA were living on my property, and they didn't even know it. Their ignorance was my weapon, and I was about to turn the tables. The discovery of that 1986 surveyor's map was like finding a loaded shotgun in a haystack. Rachel Harper and her HOA thought they could bully me off my own land, but they'd built their precious Willow Creek estates on 50 acres that still belonged to the Wade family. I spent the next morning at my kitchen table, poring over the documents, cross-referencing them with online county records. Every detail checked out. The coordinates, the survey notes, the deed sit was airtight. Rachel's campaign was built on a lie bigger than her clipboard, and I was ready to fire back. But Rachel wasn't slowing down. A certified letter arrived from a lawyer named Karen Wheeler, a county property dispute specialist who'd clearly been hired to give Rachel's threats some teeth. The letter was a masterpiece of legal bluster, claiming my ranch had lost its grandfather clause protection because I'd altered the scope of my operations. It demanded I stop all livestock activity within 10 days or face a lawsuit for nuisance abatement and environmental remediation. The kicker? Karen knew better. She'd been handling cases in this county for 15 years and would have known my ranch hadn't changed significantly since my daddy's time. I was running fewer cattle than in the 90s, using quieter equipment, and following regulations that didn't exist in Granddaddy's day. This was a paid-for fabrication, and it stung. Worse, Rachel had been busy rallying Willow Creek. She'd collected signatures from 31 of the 47 households for a petition to rezone my land from agricultural to residential, which would shut me down cold. The petition was dripping with sob stories, parents worried about their kids' health, homeowners fretting over property values, even claims my cattle were a biohazard. It was clever, painting me as a reckless rancher while Rachel played the concerned citizen. If this went to a county hearing, I'd be fighting a mob, not just a clipboard. That night, surrounded by legal papers, I felt a flicker of panic. Rachel had outmaneuvered me, turning neighbors into enemies and building a case that looked solid to anyone who didn't know the law. But as I stepped onto my porch and saw Granddaddy's old survey stakes glinting in the moonlight, his words echoed. "Play their game, but play it better." I wasn't done yet. The next day, I drove to the county courthouse and spent 4 hours digging through records. What I found was gold. The 2022 development agreement for Willow Creek explicitly acknowledged my ranch's operations, stating that residential construction wouldn't interfere with agriculture. The developers had even used my cattle as a selling point, marketing Country Charm, with photos of my herd in their brochures. Better yet, every homeowner had signed a disclosure when buying their house, agreeing they understood they were moving next to a working ranch. The forms were clear, highlighted in yellow, requiring separate initials. Noises, odors, and traffic from my operation were to be expected. Rachel's entire campaign ignored these facts. I needed a heavy hitter, so I hired Tom Baxter, a lawyer who'd spent 30 years defending farmers against suburban sprawl. His office, in a converted farmhouse, was lined with photos of ranchers he'd saved from developers and HOAs. When I showed him the surveyor's map and county records, Tom leaned back and laughed. "Harlan, this isn't just overreach. It's trespassing. Rachel's been breaking the law for 2 years." The final piece fell into place when Ellen Price, the HOA secretary, called me in tears. "Mr. Wade, I can't keep quiet anymore. Rachel's been lying. She said the county cited you for violations, but I checked at TVE, got nothing. She claimed the state was investigating, but they've never heard of you. I've got meeting minutes proving she made it all up to scare people. Ellen's evidence was dynamite, and I was ready to light the fuse. But I didn't just want to win. I wanted Rachel to regret ever picking this fight. She'd spent months trying to ruin me with lies and intimidation. Proving her wrong wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel the consequences. Tom recommended a private investigator, Lisa Coleman, who specialized in digging up dirt for legal cases. Lisa's report on Rachel was a revelation. This wasn't her first time stirring trouble. In Dallas, she'd been sued for harassing an elderly man over his backyard chickens, filing false complaints until the city stepped in. Another HOA banned her from leadership after she misused funds for personal vendettas. Most damning, Rachel had lied on her Willow Creek mortgage application, claiming to be an architectural consultant when she was a part-time call center worker scraping by on side hustles selling makeup. She was 3 months behind on her mortgage, and her financial house of cards was crumbling. Rachel's next mistake was calling an emergency HOA meeting to crow about the health department investigating me. She'd planned it like a pep rally, with handouts about property values and safety. She didn't expect me to show up, armed with Morales' report and the surveyor's map. The Willow Creek Community Center, a double-wide trailer, was packed with residents. Rachel was mid-speech, waving her clipboard, when I walked in, green flannel and all, carrying a folder thick with truth. The room went silent. Rachel's face froze as I set my folder on her table of propaganda. "Evening, neighbors," I said, calm as a summer breeze. "I've got the health department's report from yesterday. My ranch exceeds all standards, no risk to anyone." I read Morales' conclusion aloud, letting it sink in. Then I spread out the surveyor's map. "And here's something else. Your parking lot and entrance road? They're on my land." The gasps were audible. Rachel stammered, claiming the survey was fake, but when I offered to let anyone call the surveyor, her bluff collapsed. Ellen stood up, voice shaking, and admitted Rachel had lied about everything. One by one, residents confessed they'd been misled. Greg admitted signing papers blindly. A couple, the Millers, said they'd moved here for the ranch's charm and felt duped. 15 families withdrew their petition signatures on the spot. Rachel's victory party turned into her public unraveling. By the meeting's end, Ellen resigned as secretary, residents voted to halt all HOA actions against me, and Rachel stood alone, clutching her clipboard like a lifeline. But I wasn't done. The next morning, I had the surveyor install bright orange markers along my property line, including the parking lot. I ordered private property signs and sent certified letters to every Willow Creek household, demanding $400 a month to use my land. The fallout was instant. My phone rang at dawn with panicked residents, some angry, most apologetic. They'd thought they held the power, but I'd flipped the script. Rachel hired a Dallas lawyer, spending $5,000 to threaten me with charges of extortion and harassment. But her lawyer hadn't done his homework. Tom's response was simple. Demanding rent for my own land wasn't extortionate, was property law. The orange survey markers and private property signs I'd planted around Willow Creek's parking lot were like a slap in the face to Rachel Harper's crumbling empire. My certified letters demanding $400 a month for land use had lit a fire under the neighborhood, and the calls started coming before the sun was up. Some residents, like the Thompsons, were furious, accusing me of holding their driveways hostage. Others, like Mrs. Clara Hensley, called to apologize, admitting they'd been swayed by Rachel's lies. The power dynamic had shifted overnight. For months, Rachel had painted me as a lone rancher against a united community. Now, the truth was out. I held the deed to their parking lot, and they were the ones scrambling. Rachel's response was as desperate as it was predictable. Her new Dallas lawyer, a slick-talking type named Victor Lang, fired off a letter accusing me of criminal harassment and conspiracy to defraud for charging rent on disputed land. He demanded I remove the signs and markers immediately, threatening a lawsuit that would protect the rights of Willow Creek residents. It was bold but hollow. Victor hadn't bothered to check the county records, which clearly showed the 50 acres under Willow Creek were mine. Tom Baxter, my lawyer, sent back a polite but razor-sharp reply. "Mr. Wade is exercising his legal rights as the landowner. Your clients have been trespassing for 2 years. We suggest you review the 1986 survey before escalating further." The real blow to Rachel came from an unexpected source. An anonymous tip to the Texas Attorney General's office triggered an investigation into Willow Creek's HOA finances. It turned out Rachel had siphoned $4,200 from the Treasury to pay for lawyers and consultants in her anti-ranch crusade, all without board approval. The news spread like wildfire, and the 12 families still backing Rachel started to sweat. They were now facing potential liability for her reckless spending. By the end of the week, Rachel's support had evaporated, leaving her isolated in the community she'd tried to rule. Desperate to regain control, Rachel took her fight to the media. She pitched herself to local news outlets as a single mother bullied by a greedy rancher who was extorting hard-working families. Her story was compelling, if you ignored the facts. A community of dream home owners held hostage by a vindictive landowner using legal loopholes to punish their legitimate concerns. A few stations ran with it, painting me as a heartless cowboy weaponizing property law. The headlines stung, but Rachel had made a fatal mistake. Her narrative was built on lies that wouldn't survive a fact check. Within hours, Tom Baxter was on the phone with reporters, supplying them with the 1986 survey, Willow Creek Sales Contracts, which disclosed my ranch's existence, and Inspector Morales' Health Department report clearing my operation. More importantly, Willow Creek residents started calling the stations themselves. The Millers, who'd moved here for the rural charm, were livid at being misrepresented. Clara Hensley told one reporter, "Harlan's ranch was here before any of us. Rachel lied to scare us." The media tide turned fast. By the next day, stories were running with headlines like HOA President's False Claims Spark Land Dispute and Rancher Defends Family Legacy Against Baseless Attacks. Rachel's personal life was unraveling just as quickly. The Attorney General's investigation demanded she repay the misused HOA funds, plus penalties. Her mortgage company, already fed up with her missed payments, began foreclosure proceedings. Victor Lang, her Dallas lawyer, started sending her bills she couldn't pay. Worst of all, the IRS opened a probe into her unreported income from her makeup side hustle, thanks to records uncovered during the HOA audit. The woman who tried to bankrupt me was drowning in her own legal and financial mess. Meanwhile, Willow Creek was ready to move on without her. Ellen Price, now interim HOA president, called a community meeting to negotiate a long-term solution for the parking lot. 43 of the 47 households showed up. The highest turnout ever, and the mood was night and day different from Rachel's hate-fueled rallies. Gone were the shouts about health hazards and property values. Instead, residents wanted peace and practicality. I was invited as a guest, not a villain, and the difference hit me hard. Parents who'd once feared my cattle now asked about ranching with genuine curiosity. Kids who'd been taught to see me as a threat wanted to visit the barns. The negotiation was straightforward. I offered to lower the parking fee to $300 per household, with the money going towards shared road maintenance and security lighting that would benefit both my ranch and Willow Creek. In return, the HOA would sign an agreement acknowledging my property rights, drop all legal challenges to my ranch, and set rules for parking lot access. 39 families signed within a week, bringing in $11,700 a month, money I plan to use for fencing upgrades and donations to the county's 4-H program. The 8 holdouts eventually caved when they realized they'd otherwise be parking on the street and hiking to their homes. Rachel, now a pariah, couldn't stop the community's shift. Her house went into foreclosure, and she was forced to pack up and leave for Dallas, still facing lawsuits and a criminal investigation over the HOA funds. The woman who dreamed of driving me off my land had driven herself out instead. But even as I watched her taillights fade, I knew this wasn't just about her. It was about what happens when someone mistakes a Texas rancher for a pushover. 6 months later, an unmarked envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside was a handwritten note on plain paper. "Mr. Wade, I'm sorry for everything. I was wrong about your ranch, the law, and turning your neighbors against you. I hope Willow Creek can move forward in peace. Rachel." I read it on my porch, coffee in hand, and felt a mix of satisfaction and pity. She'd learned her lesson the hard way, but she'd learned it. The aftermath of Rachel's departure was transformative. She'd been ordered to repay the $4,200 in HOA funds, plus fines, and faced IRS penalties for her unreported income. Her plea deal banned her from ever holding an HOA leadership role in Texas again. But the real change was in Willow Creek. Ellen Price was elected permanent HOA president, running on transparency and cooperation. Greg Turner, the treasurer, took a financial management course and started issuing clear monthly reports. Meetings became problem-solving sessions, not battlegrounds. My relationship with Willow Creek evolved too. The $11,700 in monthly parking fees funded new gravel for shared roads and motion sensor lights that made everyone feel safer. Several families became regular buyers of my grass-fed beef, and their kids started visiting to help with chores, learning about cattle and hay. The ranch Rachel had called a hazard was now a community asset, proof that truth and patience could turn enemies into allies. The dust had settled on Rachel Harper's failed crusade, but the ripples of our clash were still spreading through Willow Creek estates and beyond. My ranch, once the target of a vicious campaign, was now a cornerstone of the community. The $11,700 in monthly parking fees from the 47 households had become a steady stream, funding improvements that benefited everyone. New gravel smoothed out the shared roads, and motion sensor lights cast a safe glow over the neighborhood at night. I'd even donated a chunk to the county's 4-H program, helping kids learn about agriculture the way I had as a boy. But the real victory wasn't the money, it was the shift in how Willow Creek saw me. Families who'd once signed Rachel's petition now bought my grass-fed beef. Their kids, who'd been taught to fear my cattle, were now eager to help feed them, asking questions about hay and branding with wide-eyed curiosity. Ellen Price, the new HOA president, was a breath of fresh air. Unlike Rachel's reign of fear, Ellen ran meetings like a town hall, encouraging open discussion and real solutions. Greg Turner, the treasurer, had turned over a new leaf, providing detailed financial reports that made sense even to folks who didn't know a spreadsheet from a saddle. The HOA's focus shifted to practical issues, fixing potholes, planning a community picnic, and even starting a neighborhood watch. Rachel's divisive tactics were a fading memory, replaced by a sense of unity I hadn't thought possible a year ago. My mornings on the porch, coffee in hand, felt different now. The tension that had hung over my land like a storm cloud was gone. I'd walk out in my green flannel and denim jacket, survey my 500 acres, and feel a quiet pride. This wasn't just about holding my ground, it was about proving that a legacy built on hard work and truth could outlast any clipboard-wielding bully. But I wasn't naive. Rachel's defeat had sent a message, but it also put a spotlight on my ranch. I had to stay sharp, because trouble in Texas rarely stays gone for long. That spring, Willow Creek held its first ranch day, a community barbecue behind my main barn. It was Ellen's idea, a way to bridge the gap between the subdivision and my operation. Families brought covered dishes, potato salad, brisket, and pecan pies that could make a grown man cry. Kids ran through the pasture, helping my hired hand, Javier, toss hay to the cattle. Parents asked about rotational grazing and soil health, genuinely interested in the work that kept my ranch humming. We raised $2,000 for the county's agricultural education program, but the real payoff was seeing neighbors laugh together, sharing stories under the wide Texas sky. Rachel had tried to tear us apart. Instead, she'd given us a reason to come together. The legal fallout from her campaign was still unfolding. Rachel's plea deal required her to repay the $4,200 she'd misspent from the HOA treasury, plus $1,500 in penalties. The IRS hit her with fines for unreported income from her makeup sales, and her foreclosure was finalized, leaving her with nothing but a rented apartment in Dallas and a mountain of legal bills. Her permanent ban from HOA leadership in Texas was a final nail in her coffin, ensuring she'd never terrorize another neighborhood. When I read her apology note again, I felt a twinge of sympathy. She'd been humbled, stripped of her illusions of power, but she'd brought it on herself. My victory wasn't just personal, it was starting to resonate. Tom Baxter, my lawyer, was invited to speak at a Texas Farm Bureau conference about defending agricultural rights against suburban encroachment. He used my case as a blueprint, showing how proper documentation and a cool head could dismantle even the most organized attacks. The Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association published a case study on the Willow Creek dispute, highlighting the importance of knowing your property lines and standing firm. My story was becoming a cautionary tale for HOA zealots who thought they could steamroll farmers with petitions and lawyers. Back at the ranch, I was making plans. The parking fees gave me breathing room to invest in upgrades, new fencing to rotate pastures, a better irrigation system to weather droughts, and even a small storefront to sell beef directly to locals. Willow Creek families were my best customers, stopping by with kids in tow to pick up ribeyes and ground chuck. One Saturday, the Millers brought their daughter, Emma, who'd written a school report on my ranch. She shyly handed me a copy, complete with photos of my herd and a section titled, "Why Ranches Matter." I don't cry easy, but that one got me close. Still, I kept my guard up. Rachel's media stunt had left a mark, and while the truth had won out, I knew some folks outside Willow Creek still saw me as the greedy rancher from her headlines. A few anonymous comments on local news sites called my rent demands extortion, ignoring the fact that I'd lowered the fee and used it for community good. It was a reminder that perception could be as tricky as reality, especially in an age where a tweet could outrun a deed. I started attending county zoning meetings just to keep an eye on things and made a point to shake hands with local officials. Granddaddy always said, "Stay friendly, but stay ready." One afternoon, Clara Hensley stopped by with a plate of her famous cornbread. Over coffee, she told me how Willow Creek had changed. "Folks talk to each other now," she said. "Not just about rules, but about life. Rachel made us suspicious, but you made us neighbors." Her words stuck with me. The ranch hadn't just survived, it had become a bridge, connecting people who'd forgotten what community meant. As summer rolled in, I got a call from a reporter working on a follow-up story. She wanted to know how Willow Creek and I were faring a year after the dust-up. I invited her out, showed her the barns, and introduced her to Javier, who'd started giving kids mini tours on weekends. She met Ellen and a few residents at the community center, where they were planning the next ranch day. The article ran in the Sunday paper, titled "From Feud to Friendship: How a Texas Ranch United a Neighborhood." It wasn't perfect. Some readers still grumbled about my hardball tactics, but it told the truth. My ranch was here to stay, and Willow Creek was better for it. By fall, the ranch was busier than ever. I'd hired another hand to keep up with demand for beef, and the 4-H program was sending kids out for workshops on animal care. Willow Creek's HOA had even proposed a joint project, a community garden near the parking lot, with my compost as the starter. I agreed, on the condition that the kids helped turn the soil. It was a small thing, but it felt like a promising sign that the scars Rachel left were healing. As winter crept over the Texas plains, my 500-acre ranch stood prouder than ever, its barns weathered but unbowed, its cattle grazing under a sky that felt a little clearer after the storm of the past 2 years. The battle with Rachel Harper and her HOA had left scars, but it had also forged something strong: a community that valued truth over fear and cooperation over conflict. My mornings on the porch, coffee steaming in the chill air, were no longer shadowed by dread. In my green flannel and denim jacket, I'd survey my land and feel a deep certainty. The Wade legacy was secure, not just for me, but for the generations to come. Willow Creek Estates had become more than neighbors, they were partners. The community garden we'd started near the parking lot was thriving, with kids from both the subdivision and the 4-H program tending rows of tomatoes and okra. The $11,700 in monthly parking fees kept flowing, and I'd used the latest batch to install a new cattle guard at the ranch entrance and fund scholarships for local high schoolers pursuing agriculture degrees. Ellen Price, now a trusted friend, would stop by with updates on HOA projects, like a planned playground that would double as a learning space for farm safety workshops. Greg Turner, ever the reformed treasurer, had even suggested a joint savings fund for future road repairs, which I happily endorsed. The second annual Ranch Day, held in the spring of 2025, was bigger than the first. 50 families showed up every household in Willow Creek, plus folks from nearby towns who'd heard about the event. Javier, my hired hand, led a calf roping demo that had kids cheering, while Clara Hensley organized a pie baking contest that drew enough entries to feed a small army. The highlight was a speech by Emma Miller, the girl who'd written that school report on my ranch. Now a year older, she stood on a hay bale and talked about how learning to care for cattle had inspired her to study veterinary science. The crowd clapped until their hands hurt, and I'll admit, I had to blink hard to keep my eyes clear. The broader impact of my fight was still unfolding. Tom Baxter's conference talks had turned our story into a rallying cry for farmers across Texas and beyond. The Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association's case study was now required reading for agricultural law students at Texas A&M, and I'd been invited to speak at a regional Farm Bureau meeting. I wasn't much for public speaking, but I told my story plain. Know your deeds, keep your records, and don't back down when someone tries to steal what's yours. The applause was nice, but the real reward was knowing ranchers like me had a blueprint to fight back. Rachel Harper's name rarely came up anymore, but her downfall was complete. After moving to Dallas, she tried to reinvent herself as a community consultant, but her reputation followed her. The lawsuits, fines, and IRS penalties had drained her finances, and last I heard, she was working odd jobs to stay afloat. Her apology note, tucked in a drawer in my office, was a reminder of how far she'd fallen and how hard it is to rebuild trust once you've burned it to the ground. I didn't hate her. She'd picked a fight she couldn't win, and the consequences were her own doing. The ranch itself was thriving. With the parking fees and growing beef sales, I'd expanded my herd to 250 head and built a new hay barn to store surplus for lean years. The storefront I'd opened was a hit, with Willow Creek families and local restaurants keeping the coolers stocked with orders. Javier had taken on more responsibility, training the new hand I'd hired, a young man named Miguel who'd grown up on a dairy farm and had a knack for fixing equipment. The 4-H workshops were now a monthly event, with kids learning everything from animal husbandry to soil testing. One boy, a shy 12-year-old named Caleb, told me he wanted to be a rancher like me. I gave him a spare hat and told him to keep showing up. He hasn't missed a session since. The media attention had mostly died down, but every so often, a reporter would call for a quote or a feature. A national agriculture magazine ran a story titled "The Ranch That Fought Back," complete with photos of my herd and the community garden. It was humbling, but it also kept me vigilant. The internet had a long memory, and a few trolls still called me that greedy cowboy online, twisting my rent demands into something sinister. I ignored them, focusing instead on the county zoning board, where I'd become a regular to ensure no new developments blindsided me. Granddaddy's advice, stay friendly, but stay ready, was my North Star. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky orange, Ellen dropped by with a proposal. The HOA wanted to name the community garden Wade's Patch, in honor of my family's role in bringing Willow Creek together. I was floored. That's too much, I said, but she insisted, saying it was a way to thank me for turning a feud into a future. We settled on calling it Legacy Patch, a nod to both my ranch and the community's shared commitment to growth. The dedication ceremony, set for the next ranch day, would include a plaque with a simple inscription, built on truth, rooted in unity. Looking back, the fight with Rachel Harper wasn't just about land, it was about justice. She'd used lies and fear to attack my livelihood, betting I'd fold under pressure. Instead, I'd fought back with facts, patience, and a stubborn refusal to let my family's legacy be erased. The result was more than a victory, it was a transformation. Willow Creek, once a battleground, was now a place where kids learned to bale hay and parents swapped recipes over my beef. My ranch, once a hazard, was a symbol of resilience, proof that hard work and honesty could mend even the deepest divides. As I write this, I'm planning for the future. I've started a trust to ensure the ranch stays in Wade's hands, no matter what challenges come next. Miguel's training to take on more leadership, and I'm mentoring Caleb, who's already sketching out his own dream ranch in a notebook I gave him. The community garden's expanding, with plans for a small orchard, and Ellen's talking about a scholarship fund tied to ranch day proceeds. The scars of Rachel's campaign are faint now, replaced by roots that run deep. This story isn't just mine, it's a lesson for anyone who's faced a bully-wielding power they don't deserve. Know your rights, keep your proof, and don't let fear cloud your resolve. When someone tries to take what's yours, whether it's land or dignity, fight smart and fight hard. Bullies like Rachel count on intimidation, but they crumble when you stand tall with the truth. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced an injustice that tested your resolve? How did you handle it? Did you fight back with facts, like I did, or find another way to reclaim what was yours? What do you think about the line between standing up for yourself and escalating a conflict? Share your stories and perspectives, especially on how we deal with bullying and unfairness in our lives. Your voice matters, and I'm eager to see where you stand.